The Border Collie launched off the counter and cleared the espresso machine at a height that the Vithran trade attaché later described, in her official incident report, as structurally impossible for an Earth quadruped of that mass. She was not wrong. Pip was 11 kilograms of pure velocity wearing a black and white coat, and she had been building to this exit since the moment the milk frother fired up at the wrong pitch, and her instincts decided, unilaterally, that the sound was a problem requiring immediate investigation. She crossed the counter in 2 strides, clipped the frother with her hip, knocked a tray of espresso cups into the collection bin, and hit the cafe floor in a landing that sent her sliding across the polished composite decking into the base of the attaché's chair. She looked up at the attaché. She wagged once. The attaché, vain, 3-fingered, slate-colored, 2 advanced degrees in interspecies trade law, looked down at Pip with the expression of someone who had walked into a situation her training had not covered. Nadia Brecht came around the counter with a cloth and the flat-faced calm of a person who had been doing this for 14 months. "That's Pip," she said. She collected the attaché's data tablet from where it had slid to the floor, wiped it down, and handed it back. "She's fine. She does that." "The animal scaled your preparation surface," Vane said carefully. "Yes." Nadia crouched and clipped a lead to Pip's collar, not restrainingly, more as a formality, the way you acknowledge a situation you don't entirely control. Pip sat. Her eyes were still fixed on the frother. Her tail was still going. "She was born to herd things," Nadia said. "The frother sounds like a scared sheep to her. She's working." Vane looked at the frother. She looked at Pip. "There is no sheep," she said. "She knows," Nadia said. "She's helping anyway." That was the first incident. It went into Nadia's notebook under the heading Pip versus the frother, round 1, which implied there would be additional rounds, which there were, because Pip was a Border Collie and the frother continued to exist. The cafe had no official name when Nadia opened it. The registration form had a field labeled business designation, and she had typed Nadia's into it because she couldn't think of anything better, and the form was due in 3 hours. It had been Nadia's for 14 months now, long enough for regulars, a waiting list for the window seats, and a comprehensive informal record of every incident involving Pip. The outpost sat at the edge of the Vithran corridor. Human traders, alien diplomats, and freight coordinators from half a dozen species sharing a commercial level. Nadia had considered, when she applied for the lease, that this might be a good market. What she had not considered was that Pip would become the central variable in approximately 30% of all customer interactions. Pip had come with Nadia from the agricultural station on the outer rim, where Nadia had spent 3 years growing hydroponic crops and running a small coffee operation out of a reclaimed greenhouse. The farm had folded when the soilbed substrate failed. Nadia packed everything she could fit into 2 freight units. Pip had taken up most of the first unit because she refused to be separated from a particular blanket, a rope toy she had owned since she was 8 weeks old, and a wicker basket she had never once slept in but considered essential. She was 3 years old now and had opinions about everything. The second major incident happened in week 6, when a Gathrak trade delegation of 4 held a preliminary meeting at the corner table. The Gathrak were large, triple-jointed, and conducted business in low, deliberate tones that Pip found deeply suspicious. She spent the first 20 minutes watching them from behind the counter with the focused stillness of a dog who has identified a variable and is deciding what to do about it. Then one of the delegates gestured broadly to illustrate a point about shipping container allocation, and his arm moved fast and wide, and Pip made her assessment. She was over the counter in a second, which Nadia had learned to see coming, and which she could not stop once the threshold had been crossed. Pip circled the table twice at speed, made 3 tight passes around the delegate's chair legs as if compressing them into a smaller formation, and then sat in the center of the table arrangement and barked once. Not aggressively, critically. The bark of a professional who had spotted a structural problem and wanted it on the record. The four Gathrak did not move. They were large, battle-hardened, and had faced situations that would strip paint off a bulkhead. None of that had prepared them for 11 kilograms of opinionated Border Collie sitting inside their meeting. Nadia appeared with the lead, the cloth, and the flat expression. "She was hurting you," Nadia explained, clipping the lead. "You were spread out. She wanted you in a tighter group." There was a silence. The senior delegate, whose name badge read Advocate Ossen, looked at Pip. Pip looked at Ossen. "Is it done?" Ossen asked. "With the hurting, yes." Nadia scooped Pip off the table. "Probably." Ossen straightened his notes. He looked at where Pip had been sitting, which was the exact center of the table arrangement. Then he looked at his three delegates and said something in Gathrak that the translation relay at Nadia's counter rendered as, "The formation assessment was not incorrect." The meeting continued. Nadia wrote Pip versus the delegation in the notebook and went back to the Frother. By month 4, the incidents had developed their own rhythm. Pip did not discriminate by species. She herded Velhari researchers, Thurvian freight coordinators, and the 3 human traders from the Karev supply line who came in every second Tuesday, and had long since given up trying to sit in configurations she disapproved of. She knocked over exactly 2 ceramic cups per week on average. She excavated the mat behind the counter 3 times, once all the way down to the composite floor, looking for something Nadia never identified. She barked at the ventilation grates on Wednesdays. She also, every morning without exception, sat with Nadia during the half hour before the café opened. Not moving, not working, not investigating anything. Just present. Her chin on Nadia's knee while Nadia drank her coffee and watched the transit corridor through the window. The light on Kuven came in blue-gold from the planet's reflected glow, and Pip sat in it with her eyes half closed while Nadia read the day's freight manifests. Nadia did not write that in the notebook. Some things were not incidents. The incident that generated an actual Coalition Memo happened in month 7, when a joint human-Vithran commercial review session was convened at 3 tables pushed together in the back of Nadia's café. A Vithran logistics coordinator named Ossen had asked if the space was available, and Nadia had said yes. She had forgotten to account for Pip's feelings about the ventilation duct that ran along the back wall. The review session had been underway for 40 minutes when the duct cover, a standard Outpost composite panel, dislodged from its fitting and landed on the table in front of the Vithran delegation's lead coordinator. This was because Pip had, at some point in the previous 3 days, been methodically working the corner fastener loose, and the vibration of the commercial HVAC cycle at the 2-hour mark was sufficient to complete the job. The panel was not heavy. Nobody was hurt, but it landed precisely in the center of the documents Ossen had been presenting, and the review session paused for 6 minutes while everyone established that the ceiling was not failing. As Nadia explained it to the assembled delegates, ongoing maintenance work on the part of her assistant. She looked at Pip when she said it. Pip looked back with the expression of a professional whose project had concluded on schedule. The memo that Ossen's office later circulated described the incident as an unexpected structural intervention and recommended future review sessions avoid the back tables until the Brecht establishment's auxiliary maintenance process is complete. Nadia read the memo twice. She was not entirely sure it was wrong. Month 9 brought the worst incident, which was also, and Nadia understood this was a strange thing to think, the one she was most proud of. A Thurvian cargo broker named Vex had been, across 3 visits, escalating a dispute with a human freight coordinator named Shen over a bonded container that each of them claimed. The dispute had grown from a documentation question into something that had stopped being about the container and started being about who had the authority to be right. By the 3rd visit, it had the particular temperature of an argument looking for somewhere to happen. It happened at the table, nearest the counter at 1400. Nadia was behind the bar, watching, with the awareness of someone who has worked customer service long enough to know when two people have stopped discussing and started something else. She was calculating whether to intervene when Vex stood up, not threatening, exactly, but abrupt, voice going sharp and loud in a way that sent two Velhari researchers at the far table looking up from their work. Pip was off the mat in under a second. She moved between the table and Vex, not fast, not barking, just present. She stood between Vex and Shen and looked up at Vex with the flat professional attention of a dog who has identified a formation problem and inserted herself into it. Her tail made one slow pass. She did not growl. She did not move. Vex looked down at her. He was twice her height and had presumably faced situations considerably more alarming than a Border Collie. He stood there for a moment with his voice still sharp, and found that it was difficult to keep the sharpness aimed at something that was just watching him with calm black eyes and apparently endless patience. He sat down. Pip walked back to the mat behind the counter and lay down. Shen and Vex reached a documented agreement about the container 22 minutes later. Nadia did not know whether this was because of Pip or in spite of her, or because the interruption had broken the temperature of the room. She wrote Pip versus the dispute in the notebook and left it there, because some things did not need to be understood to be acknowledged. The two Velhari researchers at the far table had not gone back to their work. They were watching the mat where Pip was lying with an expression Nadia recognized from month 1. The expression of beings who had walked into a situation their training had not covered. By month 12, Nadia had stopped explaining Pip to newcomers. The regulars knew. The repeat visitors had their own understandings, calibrated by however many incidents they had personally witnessed. The notebook was 3/4 full. What she had not anticipated was the conversation she had with Ossen, the logistics coordinator, the one from the ceiling panel memo, who came in alone on a Thursday morning in month 13, ordered a coffee he did not immediately drink, and sat at the window table looking at Pip, who was in her morning position with her chin on Nadia's knee. "How long have you had her?" Ossen asked. "Since she was 8 weeks old," Nadia said. 4 years. She was with you on the agricultural station. She herded everything on the agricultural station. We had no animals. She herded the substrate carts." Nadia looked at Pip. "And the supply drones. And me when I was standing in the wrong spot." Ossen was quiet for a moment. "My species does not keep companion animals," he said. "We have working animals, but not this." "This is also a working animal," Nadia said. "She just doesn't always agree on what the work is." Ossen looked at Pip. Pip's eyes were half closed. The early light came through the window the same as it always did, blue gold, and she was sitting in it without investigating it or hurting it or trying to identify what sound it was making. Just sitting. "Does it bother you," Ossen said, "when she disrupts things?" Nadia considered that. She considered the Frother, and the Gathrak formation, and the ceiling panel, and 14 months of incidents that had involved a knocked-over display rack, 3 altercations with the HVAC system, a diplomatic data tablet that needed cleaning twice, and one moment where a Thurvian cargo dispute had quietly resolved because a Border Collie had stood between two people and waited. "It's just her," Nadia said. "She's trying to help. She doesn't always get it right, but she's always trying." Ossen looked at Pip again. Pip's tail moved once slowly, the small acknowledgement of being seen without getting up about it. "In our working animal doctrine," Ossen said carefully, "there is a category designation for animals that cannot be directed, but that function correctly in situations too complex to direct. We do not assign them tasks, we assign them proximity." Nadia did not say anything. "I do not know if that is what she is," Ossen said, "but it is what she reminds me of." He drank his coffee. He stayed for another 20 minutes, which was unusual for Ossen, who normally visited with the efficiency of someone billing by the minute. When he left, Pip watched him go. Then she put her chin back on Nadia's knee. Nadia closed the notebook, which had exactly 1 page left. She had been aware of this for 3 days and hadn't known what to write on it. Now she reached over the counter for a pen and wrote below the most recent entry. She's trying to help. She looked at it, then she added, she always has been. Outside, Outpost Kuven was coming into its morning cycle, the corridor lights stepping up to full, the transit arrivals beginning to filter through the commercial level. The Frother was going to fire up in about 4 minutes. Pip's left ear had already rotated toward the back counter, tracking the pre-warm cycle. Nadia picked up her coffee. "Don't," she said. Pip's ear rotated back. She looked at Nadia. She stayed. Nadia wrote that in the margin because there was still space. She listens when it matters. The Frother fired at full pitch. Pip's whole body went taut with the effort of not moving, and she held it for 3 full seconds, and she did not launch, and Nadia reached down and scratched her once behind the ear, the same way she had on the first day in the greenhouse when Pip was 8 weeks old, and the substrate carts had needed someone to manage them. "Good girl," Nadia said. The morning opened up around them the way mornings did, all the familiar chaos of the corridor, the transit announcements, the first customers coming through the door. Pip watched it come in and stayed where she was, which was beside Nadia, which was where she had always been, which was, Nadia had come to understand over 14 months and 1 full notebook, the only place either of them had ever really needed her to be.